It wasn't the kind of thing I ever thought would happen to me. It wasn't something I had even considered, let alone expected. But one day, everything I thought I knew about my life was turned upside down by something as simple as a cardboard box. I was cleaning the attic, as one does when they're avoiding their thoughts. The kind of thoughts that always creep up when you find yourself at a crossroads in life. I was going through old boxes, sorting out things I hadn't seen in years, college textbooks, old photos, a bunch of stuff I had promised to throw out, but never got around to. Among the clutter, there it was, a dusty, unlabeled box tucked into the corner of the attic, hidden beneath some old blankets. I don't know why I opened it. It wasn't like me to go digging through things I didn't remember, but something about it pulled me in. Maybe it was the way it was tucked away, almost as if it had been deliberately concealed. I lifted the lid, and immediately, I wished I hadn't. Inside the box were a few seemingly random items: an old wristwatch, a leather journal with a name written in gold letters, Sophie, and what caught my eye the most, a set of photographs. I shuffled through the pictures, each one more unsettling than the last. They were all taken over the past few months, and in every single one, my wife, Harper, was there. She was smiling, laughing, but not with me. She was with someone else. At first, I thought I was seeing things. My mind was playing tricks on me. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a joke. Harper, my wife, the woman I trusted with everything, had been spending time with another man. The first photo was innocent enough. The two of them, sitting together at a cafe, both smiling like they were in on some secret joke. I squinted at the picture, trying to piece together what it could mean. But then I flipped to the next one, and my stomach turned. It was taken in a hotel room. Harper was sitting on the edge of a bed, laughing with this man as if they had known each other for years. The look in her eyes was different from the way she looked at me. It was a look of something more, something deeper. I felt a coldness spread through my body. I could feel the weight of the photos in my hands, the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to face. But there was no denying it now. These photos weren't taken by accident. They weren't casual snapshots. These were moments she had shared with someone else, someone she had been hiding from me. But I still had questions. Why? When? How long had this been going on? What else was she hiding? I set the photos down and took a deep breath. The attic was silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. I had to know more. I had to understand what was happening. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her right away. No, I wasn't going to let her see that I knew. I wasn't ready for that. I had to investigate further, to find out exactly what she had been hiding, how far this had gone. I didn't realize it at the time, but that moment, finding that box, was the beginning of everything unraveling. What followed was a week of secrets, lies, and revelations I could never have anticipated. But at that moment, as I sat in the attic holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal, I didn't know where it would lead. All I knew was that my life, as I knew it, was over, and I had to find out how far this went. I knew I couldn't confront her immediately. That would be too obvious. She would have suspected something was wrong the moment I brought it up, and I wasn't ready for that. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by simply asking. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands, in the quietest way possible. For the next few days, I became someone I barely recognized. Every interaction with Harper, every word she said, felt like a performance. She was as normal as could be, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. But I was studying her every move, every subtle glance, every slip-up. I knew something was off, but I had to confirm it. I found myself watching her more closely, more intensely than I had in years. I noticed things I hadn't before. Her late-night phone calls that she always took in another room. The way she would get fidgety when I asked too many questions, the lingering looks she would exchange with strangers. I couldn't help but wonder, was I missing something, or was I finally seeing her for who she really was? The first breakthrough came one evening after dinner. Harper had gone out for a girls' night with her friends, something she did a few times a month. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but after everything that had happened, I couldn't help but wonder if tonight would be different. She had been acting a little more distant lately, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After she left, I took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, I felt the rush of adrenaline. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I went through her things. It wasn't something I was proud of, but the need for answers outweighed any lingering sense of guilt. Her purse was sitting on the counter, half unzipped. My hand trembled slightly as I reached in and pulled out her phone. For a second, I just stared at it. My heart raced in my chest. It felt like the device had the power to either shatter my world or return everything to normal. I unlocked it. The code she always used was still fresh in my memory. A simple 4-digit combination, something she never bothered changing, something she trusted me with. I felt a pang of discomfort, but I ignored it. I opened her messages first. The screen filled with texts from her friends. Nothing unusual, just casual plans and updates about their nights out. But then, I scrolled a little further. And that's when I saw it. A thread of messages between Harper and someone named Alex. I hadn't heard of him before, and my stomach dropped the moment I realized who he was. There were dozens of messages exchanged, and though most of them seemed harmless at first glance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The texts were friendly at first, simple greetings, plans to meet up, but then I saw it. A message from Alex saying, "I can't wait to see you again. The last time felt so right. I've never felt this way before." My heart stopped. I read it again, slowly, trying to make sense of the words, trying to tell myself I was misinterpreting them. But I wasn't. The last few texts were the worst. "I love you." Those 3 words, so simple, yet so devastating. And Harper's response, "I feel the same. We'll make this work." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I couldn't breathe. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had married, was in love with someone else. And worse, she was lying to me about it. The weight of it all crushed me, and I felt a cold, hollow emptiness spread through my chest. I quickly put the phone down, as if I could somehow pretend I hadn't just uncovered something I wasn't ready to face. But the truth was, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unread those words. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and now I could see everything clearly. What was I going to do now? Confront her? What if she denied it? What if she had a good explanation? No, I couldn't just walk into this blindly. I had to be sure. I had to know exactly what was going on. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with the idea of getting to the bottom of this. I started paying closer attention to her actions. Her phone was still buzzing with messages, always at the most inconvenient times. She would try to hide it, but I could see through the veil now. I noticed her distant behavior, how she would pull away whenever I tried to touch her, how she seemed to be more interested in her phone than in me. There were little things, tiny shifts in her demeanor that I hadn't noticed before, but now they were glaringly obvious. One evening, I decided to follow her. She had told me she was going out with her friends again, but I had a gut feeling that she wasn't being entirely truthful. I waited until she left the house and followed her discreetly in my car, keeping a safe distance. It wasn't easy, and my heart pounded in my chest the whole time, but I needed to know where she was going. I followed her for nearly an hour. She drove to a small, dimly lit apartment building in the outskirts of town. My heart sank. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, watching her walk into the building. But what happened next shocked me even more. About 30 minutes later, a man walked out. Tall, athletic, and dressed in a black jacket. He looked nothing like the people Harper usually hung out with. My gut told me everything I needed to know. This was Alex. I didn't need to see more. The picture was clear now. My wife wasn't just seeing someone behind my back. She was in love with him. I sat in my car for a long time, not knowing what to do next. The rage inside me was burning, but so was the feeling of betrayal. It was worse than anything I could have imagined. The person I had built my life with, the one I trusted the most, had been living a secret life. What came next would change everything. And I had no idea just how far this rabbit hole would go. I had been sitting in my car for what felt like hours, trying to collect myself, trying to make sense of everything. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting eerie shadows across the empty road. The apartment building where Harper had disappeared into stood like a fortress in front of me, tall and indifferent to the chaos inside my mind. I didn't know what to do next. I had the answers now. I knew Harper was seeing Alex. But what was I supposed to do with that information? Confront her right here? Storm up to that apartment and demand an explanation? Or should I wait until the next morning, when she came home with some half-baked excuse about being out with friends? I couldn't handle the thought of sitting on this any longer. My body was buzzing with the need for action, for resolution. But what kind of resolution was I hoping for? It felt like I was chasing a ghost. No matter what I did, nothing would ever be the same again. My mind raced with possibilities. If I confronted her now, it might end everything. Our marriage, our lives as we knew it. But if I didn't confront her, I'd be stuck with this gnawing sense of betrayal, haunted by her lies. Either way, I was trapped. And the worst part was, I didn't even know if I still loved her. The front door of the building creaked open, and I immediately recognized the figure stepping out into the street. It was Alex. He was holding something in his hand, and his steps were quick, as though he was trying to escape unnoticed. His eyes were scanning the parking lot, but he didn't seem to notice my car parked a few spaces down. I couldn't help but stare at him. This man who had been playing the role of the other man in my life without me even realizing it. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and dark, almost piercing eyes. His presence made my blood boil. But there was something else too. Something deeper, something that felt almost like helplessness. Was I intimidated by him? Maybe. Was I angry? Definitely. But I also felt a strange sense of guilt, as though I was invading something private, even though it was my own life that had been violated. I watched as Alex climbed into a car and drove off, disappearing into the night. My hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. I had a decision to make. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was almost intoxicating, pushing me to take action. I couldn't just sit here, paralyzed by the reality of what I knew. I had to know what Harper was doing, what was going through her mind. If she wasn't going to tell me, then I would find out for myself. Without thinking twice, I drove home. The ride felt surreal. It was as if everything had already been decided for me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I walked through the front door, the house quiet and empty. It felt cold, lonely. Harper wouldn't be home for another hour or so, I guessed. She often stayed late with her friends, but tonight, it didn't feel the same. I needed to act quickly, before my mind completely unraveled. The house felt suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on me. I went straight to the bedroom, where I began to pace. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, but one thing was clear: I needed answers. And I couldn't wait any longer. I thought about everything that had led me here. All those late nights when she would come home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, the way she would talk about Alex in passing without a second thought. The conversations that had seemed innocent at the time, but now, looking back, felt laced with secrets. I sat on the bed and grabbed my phone. I had to do something. I had to ask her. But how? What could I say that would make her admit everything? And how could I avoid sounding like I was accusing her when I knew she was guilty? I thought about the photos I had found, the messages that had been left on her phone. If I confronted her with those, it would be too obvious. She would know I'd been snooping. I couldn't risk that. No, I needed to approach this in a way that would make her open up. I didn't know how long I sat there, trying to come up with the right words, before the sound of the front door opening broke me from my thoughts. I froze. Harper was home. My heart pounded as I stood up and walked into the living room. There she was, walking through the door, looking as if nothing was wrong. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was acting normal, too normal, and I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided making eye contact. "Hey, you're home early," I said, forcing a smile, trying to sound casual. But my voice didn't quite come out right. It was shaky, unsure. Harper seemed a little caught off guard, but she quickly recovered. "Yeah, I didn't feel like staying out tonight. Just wanted to come home and relax." She dropped her bag by the door and started to take off her shoes. "Sounds nice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. "How was your night?" I was trying to sound like myself, but everything felt different. This wasn't the Harper I knew. This wasn't the woman I thought I had married. "It was fine," she replied, but the way she said it felt empty. Her eyes darted to the phone on the table, as though she was waiting for it to ring. I didn't miss the subtle tension in her movements. I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed in my mind suddenly fleeing me. Instead, I walked up to her, stopping just a few inches away. "Harper, I know about Alex." Her face went pale. For a split second, I saw fear flash in her eyes, and then it was gone, replaced by a forced calm. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, waiting for the next move. My heart was racing now. It felt like I had just opened a door I could never close again. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice trembling now. And in that moment, Harper's mask finally cracked. The silence hung between us like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. Harper stood there, not moving, not saying a word. Her face was an unreadable mask, her eyes darting between mine and the floor, as if trying to find a way out of this moment. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt as if the ground beneath me was shaking. I had asked her the question that had been haunting me for days, and now the answer seemed to be just out of reach, hidden somewhere deep inside her. I could feel her resistance, but I wasn't going to back down. "Who is he, Harper?" I repeated, my voice low but steady, a sense of urgency creeping in. "Don't lie to me. I know everything. The texts, the photos, the lies. I know about Alex." For a brief moment, her eyes widened, and she took a step back as if I had physically struck her. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't prepared for this. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the fear melted away, replaced by a cold, almost resigned expression. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening as if the words she had to say were choking her. "You don't understand," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "You never understood." I didn't know what she meant by that, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I wasn't angry, not yet, but the pain in my chest was unbearable, and I needed to hear it from her own lips. I needed to know why. "I understand enough," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I understand that you've been lying to me for months, that you've been seeing him, and you've been hiding it. I understand that everything I thought we had, everything we built together, it means nothing to you." Her eyes flickered, and I saw a brief flash of something. Guilt, perhaps, or sorrow, but it was gone in an instant. She ran her fingers through her hair, her usual composure unraveling before my eyes. I could see it now, the cracks in the perfect image she had tried to maintain. She wasn't the strong, independent woman I had married. She was just as broken as I was. "I never wanted to hurt you, Leo," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted things to be this way. But I felt trapped. I felt suffocated. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to talk to you about it." I shook my head, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "You didn't talk to me. You didn't come to me when you felt trapped. You just went behind my back and betrayed me." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let them fall. I could see how hard this was for her, but honestly, I couldn't find it in me to feel sympathy. Not yet. Maybe someday, when the hurt wasn't so raw. But not now. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she continued, her voice breaking. "Alex, he's different. He makes me feel alive again. I didn't realize how much I had been missing until I met him. I never intended to fall in love with him, but I did." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Her words were like a knife, twisting deeper with each one. I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, to make her feel the same way I felt, betrayed, heartbroken, lost. But I couldn't. I had to keep my composure. I had to listen. "You're in love with him," I said flatly, almost numb now. "You've been in love with him all along." She nodded, her lips trembling as she fought back more tears. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't stop myself." I felt a wave of anger surge through me, but I held it back. I couldn't lose control. I had to hear her out. I had to know everything, no matter how much it hurt. "So what now?" I asked, my voice tight with bitterness. "Do you leave me? Is that it? Is this over?" Harper paused, looking up at me, her eyes filled with both regret and uncertainty. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what's going to happen next. All I know is that I've been lying to you, and I can't keep doing it anymore. I need to figure out what I want, and what's best for both of us." I felt the weight of her words sink in like a stone in my chest. This was it, wasn't it? This was the moment when everything changed. The life I had known, the woman I had trusted, none of it was real anymore. It was all just a facade, a house of cards waiting to collapse. I stared at her, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. "You want to figure things out with him, don't you?" I said, my voice a little more biting now, the hurt seeping through. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I want. I need time." Time. The word echoed in my mind, like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Time was something we didn't have anymore. Not after everything that had happened. I took a step back, running my hand through my hair, trying to make sense of what she had just confessed. The world felt like it was spinning, and I wasn't sure if I was still standing or if I had just completely fallen apart. Everything I thought I knew, Everything I believed in was slipping away. I don't think I can be here anymore, Harper, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I don't think I can be the person you want me to be. I'm not that guy anymore. I don't know who I am now, but I can't keep pretending like nothing's wrong. The words stung as they left my lips, but they were the truth. The truth that I could no longer deny. She looked at me, her face a mixture of sadness and regret, but she didn't speak. She didn't try to stop me. I walked out of the room, the weight of the situation crushing me with every step. As I headed for the door, I could hear her call my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I needed to leave, to get away from everything, to figure out what was left of me after everything she had taken. I stepped into the night, feeling colder than I ever had in my life, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't know where I was going at first. My body just moved on autopilot, my mind a jumbled mess of emotions. I drove through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past me, reflecting the chaos in my head. I didn't have a destination, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. The world around me felt distant, like I was living in someone else's life. A life where the woman I loved, the one I trusted, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had walked out of our house, out of the life we had built together, without a plan. I was numb, like I had been punched in the gut and left to figure out how to breathe again. The pain was sharp, but it was almost secondary to the feeling of complete disorientation. It was like I had just found out that the ground I had been standing on for years was unstable, and everything I thought I knew was built on lies. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. I tried to focus on my breathing, tried to calm myself down. I needed clarity. I needed something to hold on to, but nothing made sense anymore. I kept seeing Harper's face in my mind, her tear-filled eyes, her voice shaking as she told me she didn't know what she wanted. It felt like a knife to the chest every time I replayed it in my head. She didn't know what she wanted, but I knew. I knew that she had made her choice. She was in love with Alex. She had been lying to me for months, betraying me while I was too blind to see it. I had been living in some warped version of reality, believing that everything was fine, when all along, my wife had been falling in love with someone else. But the hardest part was hearing her say that she needed time. Time to figure out what she wanted. She was giving herself the luxury of time, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered world. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just asking for space from me. She was giving herself an escape from the mess she had created, and from the marriage she had already mentally checked out of. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts I couldn't control. I wanted to call her, to demand answers, to scream at her for what she had done. But I didn't. I didn't trust myself to talk to her without completely losing it. What good would it do? She had already admitted that she was in love with someone else. There was no coming back from that. Finally, I started the car again, but I didn't head back home. I drove aimlessly, trying to clear my head, to think. I drove to a park on the outskirts of the city. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and I felt a strange sense of peace as I parked under the shadows of the trees. I sat there for a while, staring at the darkened playground, the swings gently moving in the breeze as if reminding me of simpler times. When life was uncomplicated, when love was just love. I thought about the past, about how we met, how everything seemed so perfect back then. We were young, carefree, and in love. I thought about our wedding day, how Harper had looked in her dress, her smile lighting up the entire room. It felt like a different life now, a life I had dreamed up, a life I had built in my mind. But it was all a fantasy. She had been living a double life, and I had been too blind to see it. I knew I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep torturing myself by thinking about the past. I had to face the reality of what was happening. But even as I accepted that, I couldn't help but feel the anger rising within me. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we had built together? I didn't have answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. Not when the truth had been laid bare in front of me. I needed to confront the reality of my situation. But the idea of facing Harper again, of having another conversation that would probably end in even more pain, felt impossible. The truth was, I didn't know what came next. I didn't know what the future held. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep living this lie. I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. Harper had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. After some time, I left the park and headed back home. The house was dark, and the silence hit me the moment I walked through the door. I looked around, noticing how empty it felt, how strange everything seemed. I could almost hear the echoes of what once was, but those echoes were fading, leaving only the hollow reality of the present. I didn't know if Harper was home yet. I didn't know if I should wait for her, or if I should leave. I didn't know what was right anymore. But as I stood there, staring at the door to our bedroom, I felt a sense of finality. Things weren't going to be the same. Not after what had happened. And then, I heard the faint sound of the front door opening. It was her. Harper. She had come home. I stood there, frozen for a moment. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment when everything I had been avoiding would come to a head. But as I heard her footsteps approaching, I felt no anger. Just an overwhelming sadness. The woman I had loved for so long was standing just a few feet away, and I knew deep down that we were no longer the same people. Leo. Her voice was soft, tentative, as if she didn't know how to approach me anymore. We need to talk. I didn't know how much more talking I could take, but I knew that we were both on the edge of something we couldn't undo. The damage had been done. The question now was, where do we go from here? And I still didn't have an answer. I stood there in the dimly lit hallway, hearing Harper's voice softly call my name. It felt surreal, as if the world had stopped spinning for just a second. I wasn't sure if I could face her, if I could look her in the eye again without seeing the image of the woman I thought I knew, who I had loved, shattered into 1,000 pieces. But I couldn't stand there forever. I had to face it, face her, and face what had been broken between us. I turned toward the sound of her voice, walking slowly down the hallway towards the living room. Harper was standing there, her hands clasped in front of her, her posture stiff, like she was afraid of what was to come. She didn't meet my gaze at first, her eyes glued to the floor, but I could see the tension in her body, the tightness in her shoulders. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're angry, Leo. I know this is hard to understand, but I need you to hear me out. Please." I crossed my arms over my chest, standing a few feet away from her. I wasn't angry, not yet, at least. I was beyond that. It wasn't anger I felt, it was disbelief. The person I had trusted, the woman I had spent years building a life with, had been living a lie right in front of me. "Harper, you've already said everything. I know everything now," I said, my voice cold, though I tried to keep it steady. "I don't need you to explain. I don't need you to tell me what happened or why. It doesn't change anything." Her eyes finally met mine, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability in them. There were tears there, tears she was desperately trying to hide. The woman standing before me was no longer the one I had known. This was someone who had been hiding in plain sight, someone who had built walls around herself, and I had been the last to notice. "I didn't want to hurt you, Leo," she said, her voice cracking. "I swear I didn't. But I've been drowning in this for so long. I never thought I'd end up here, like this." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to shout at her, to ask how she could do this to me, to scream that I had given her everything, and she had betrayed me. But instead, I stood there, my chest tight with the weight of it all. What was there left to say? "You were already gone, weren't you?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You checked out of this marriage long before I ever knew. You were already with him, while I was here, thinking everything was fine." Harper took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself for something. She wiped a tear away, her voice trembling when she spoke again. "I never meant for it to get this far. I was confused. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. But with Alex with him, I felt like I could breathe again. I felt alive." I clenched my fists, feeling the rush of frustration building inside me. She had been so cold, so distant these past months, and now I was hearing her confess to something that was even worse than I had imagined. She wasn't just emotionally distant. She was emotionally invested in someone else. And it wasn't just a fling. It was real. She had fallen in love with him. "So what now, Harper?" I asked, my voice lower now, quieter. "What do you want from me? You've already made your choice. You've already made your bed." "I know I can't undo what I've done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to understand. This wasn't easy for me. I didn't wake up one day and decide I didn't love you. But things changed. And I changed, too." I stood there, not knowing how to respond. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her admission. I didn't know if I could accept them. I didn't know if I could look past the lies, past the betrayal, and see the woman I married. Could I forgive her? Could I even look at her the same way again? I don't know who you are anymore, I said, the words cutting through the silence between us. It felt like a betrayal of its own, admitting that, but it was the truth. I didn't recognize her. I didn't recognize the woman standing before me. Leo, please, she said, taking a step toward me, her voice breaking. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever explain. But I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this. You have to believe me. This wasn't a choice I made lightly. I took a step back, needing distance, needing space. Then why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you talk to me when you started feeling trapped? Why didn't you tell me what was going on? I ran my hands through my hair, the frustration spilling over. Why did you let it get this far, Harper? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She simply stood there, looking defeated, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the situation. I didn't know what else to say to her. She had already told me everything I needed to know. She had betrayed me, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice growing firmer. I can't keep pretending like nothing happened. I can't keep living like this. Harper's face twisted in agony, and she reached out as if she wanted to stop me, but I stepped back again, shaking my head. You've made your choice, Harper. Now I need to make mine. And I'm done. I'm done living in a lie. The finality of the words hit me harder than I expected. I had never imagined I would say them, never thought I would be the one walking away. But as I stood there, staring at the woman I had once thought was my everything, I knew that there was no going back. I turned around, heading for the door. As I stepped outside into the cold night, I didn't feel any relief. I didn't feel any sense of closure. I only felt the weight of the decision I had just made, and the emptiness that now filled the space between me and the life I had once known. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay in this mess any longer. Not for her, not for anyone. The woman I had loved was gone, and so was I. The world felt oddly quiet as I left the house, the night air cool and crisp against my skin. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was supposed to do next. My thoughts were a mess, a tangled web of emotions I could barely keep up with. Everything had been stripped away, the life I thought I had, the marriage I believed in, and the future I had imagined with Harper. All of it had been shattered by the truth. And now, all I was left with was a raw, gnawing emptiness that had begun to consume me. I drove aimlessly, not paying attention to the roads I was taking or the hours slipping by. The only thing that mattered was escaping. Escaping from the reality of what had happened, escaping from the pain that lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake off. I thought maybe I could go to a friend's house, crash on a couch for the night, but none of them would understand. They wouldn't know what it felt like to be betrayed by the one person you trusted the most, the one person you thought you'd spend your life with. Eventually, I ended up at the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore the only thing breaking the silence around me. I parked the car, sat on the hood, and stared out at the dark horizon. There was something about the ocean at night, the vast emptiness of it, that seemed to echo the emptiness I felt inside. I was alone, utterly alone, and no matter how much I wanted to reach out, no matter how badly I wanted someone to help me make sense of this, I knew it was something only I could process. The truth was, I had never felt more lost in my entire life. I thought about Harper, about how she had stood there, pleading for me to understand, how she had apologized, told me she didn't mean to hurt me, but it didn't matter. Nothing she could say would ever undo the damage that had been done. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. She had left me with no other option but to walk away. And yet, as much as I knew I was doing the right thing, part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. What if there was something I missed? What if there was a way we could have fixed it? But then I remembered the photos, the texts, the things I couldn't unsee. I wasn't imagining it. She had lied to me. She had betrayed me, and I couldn't forgive that. I didn't know how long I sat there, just staring at the waves, before I felt the cold seep into my bones. My thoughts were spinning in circles, and I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped in my own life. I reached for my phone, wondering if I should call someone, but I hesitated. Who would I even call? The people who knew me as the happy, married man? The man who never showed his vulnerabilities? The man who had spent so many years pretending everything was fine, while behind closed doors, everything was falling apart? I sent a message to my best friend, Mark, but I didn't expect him to understand either. He had always been the one to tell me to be strong and man up when I faced challenges in life. But this wasn't something I could just brush off. I was drowning, and no amount of advice or empty words could save me now. The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The man who had built a life with Harper, the man who thought he had everything figured out, didn't exist anymore. I had been living in a dream, a carefully constructed reality that had just collapsed into dust. As the night wore on, I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. There was no escaping it, no running from it. I had to face the truth head-on. Harper had chosen Alex, and I had to let go. But it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. It was about finding a way to rebuild my life, to find some semblance of peace amidst the wreckage. But how? How do you rebuild when the very foundation of your life has been shattered? I stood up, the cold sand sticking to the soles of my shoes as I walked toward the water. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and indifferent. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the lies. But maybe, just maybe, I could start over. Maybe this was my chance to rediscover who I was, without the weight of a broken marriage hanging over me. I stayed there until the first light of dawn began to break across the horizon. The night had been long, and in some ways, it felt like a lifetime. But with the sunrise came a small sense of hope, a tiny spark that maybe I wasn't as lost as I felt. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't even know where I would go from here. But I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I couldn't keep drowning in my own pain. I had to move forward, one step at a time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But for the first time in days, I felt like I had some control over my future. I wasn't going to let Harper's betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let it consume me. I could start over. It wasn't going to be simple, and it wasn't going to be quick, but I could find a way out of this darkness. I had to. For me. With a deep breath, I turned and walked back to the car, the first rays of sunlight casting a soft glow on the water. The world was waking up, and so was I. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe this was the beginning of my own story, the first page of a chapter one had never expected to write. The drive back home felt different. The weight of everything I had been carrying, the heartbreak, the anger, the confusion, was still there, but it was lighter now. I wasn't sure how to explain it. It wasn't that the pain had magically disappeared, far from it, but something inside me had shifted. I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running away from my problems. I was facing them. I was choosing to move forward, not as the person I was in the past, but as someone new, someone stronger. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed how quiet the house seemed. It felt empty, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. Harper's things were still scattered around, remnants of a life we had built together, but now they felt like echoes of a time I was no longer part of. As I stood at the door, ready to step back into the house I had once called home, I realized something profound. It wasn't the house that mattered. It wasn't the furniture or the pictures on the walls. What mattered was what I carried with me inside, my strength, my ability to rise above, and my willingness to embrace whatever came next. I walked in, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of peace. Harper had already left, likely to figure out her own life with Alex. But there was no anger in me anymore. There was no need to fight, no need to prove anything. The decision was made, and now it was time to focus on myself. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo. I packed up some of the things that reminded me of Harper, the little trinkets and mementos of a time that was now behind me. I didn't destroy them, but I put them away in boxes, just as I had packed away all the hurt. I didn't need to forget, but I needed to move forward. The past was always going to be there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I took up old hobbies I had abandoned years ago, painting, running, even cooking meals just for myself. It wasn't much, but each small step brought me closer to rediscovering who I was. I didn't need anyone to complete me anymore. I had been enough all along, and I was starting to see that. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Mark. I had barely spoken to him in the last week, wrapped up in my own whirlwind of emotions. But the message was simple. Hey, let's grab a drink. It's been too long. It felt good to have someone reach out, to remind me that I wasn't alone in this world, even if it sometimes felt that way. I met him at a local bar that evening, and when he saw me, he gave me a big grin. You look like you've been through hell, but at least you're standing. I chuckled, sitting down across from him. You could say that. But you know what? I think I'm starting to get it. The whole getting back up thing. Mark raised his glass. To getting back up, he said. And I clinked my glass against his, the sound of the toast echoing in my chest, as if it symbolized something more, something profound. I had gotten back up, and I was ready to face whatever came next with an open heart, free from the shadows of my past. The days that followed weren't perfect. There were moments of doubt, moments when the loneliness crept in, but I had learned that it was okay to feel those things. I didn't have to pretend I was fine all the time. I could be vulnerable, and still, I was strong. I didn't need someone else to validate me. I could rebuild my life, piece by piece, with my own hands. Months passed, and I started noticing changes within myself. I became more comfortable in my own skin, less afraid of the unknown. I met new people, made new friends, and while I wasn't rushing into another relationship, I was open to the possibility. I learned that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And it was a journey I was now walking with my head held high, no longer burdened by the weight of someone else's mistakes. One evening, I found myself standing on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the city. The sky was a deep blue, the stars beginning to twinkle as the world around me buzzed with life. I smiled to myself, thinking about how far I had come, how much I had grown. The phone in my pocket buzzed with a message. It was from my sister, asking if I wanted to join her for a weekend trip to the mountains. I didn't hesitate for a second. I was ready to live again, to embrace the life I had been given, without fear of what lay ahead. I had learned that sometimes, the best thing you can do after heartbreak is to let go and trust that the future still holds something beautiful. I replied with a simple, yes, I'm in. As I hit send, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was excited. Not for what was to come, not for what I could control, but for the simple, beautiful act of living. Whatever the future held, I was ready for it. I had survived the storm, and now I was finally able to enjoy the calm. And so, I walked forward, no longer burdened by the past, no longer held back by the shadows of betrayal. I was free, and that was enough.